This is Mr. Richard Thompson, a man who made a life-changing decision to divorce his wife and marry a delivery girl. But why would a man leave the woman he once loved for someone society sees as beneath him? What could drive such a choice? Let's uncover the truth in this powerful and emotional story. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're new here, kindly subscribe and join us for unforgettable stories filled with lessons, love, and second chances. Let's get started. The lagoon shivered under the first gold of morning, and from his balcony in Ikoyi, Richard Thompson watched the sunlight slide over the water toward the waking skyline of Lagos. He stood in a plain white linen shirt and soft gray trousers, bare feet on cool stone, a mug of tea breathing bright steam into the air. The city murmured far below, horns, birds, the whir of a generator, yet up here, the world felt quiet enough to think. He heard the faint metronome of heels before he saw her. Victoria drifted from the glass doors like a headline come to life, silk robe whispering at her ankles, hair sculpted, makeup perfect at 7 a.m., a fragrance of something French that announced she had arrived before her voice did. "Good morning," Richard said, warm as the tea in his hands. "Morning," she replied, not meeting his eyes. She checked her phone, thumb flicking through notifications, a smile pressed into her reflection on the screen. "I thought we could have breakfast together today," he offered. The chef prepped. "No need," she cut in with a gentle wave. "I told you I don't want the oily food he makes. I'm going to the spa. I don't want to feel heavy." Richard took a breath. "We have a big kitchen here," he said lightly. "It's been months since you cooked. Do you remember how we used to cook together when we first got married? Those were good times." Victoria turned to him with a smirk that sparkled like a diamond and cut like one. "Richard, please. That was before I knew better. Cooking in this heat? With my nails? No, thank you. I am a wife, not a servant." "It's not about being a servant," he said, steady. "It's about showing care. A home-cooked meal sometimes means more than anything money can buy. Care." She laughed, delicate and dismissive. "You have money, don't you? Money buys care. Hire someone. Hire 10 people if you want. That's what rich men do." He stared out at the water to keep from staring at the distance growing between them. He had fought his way up from a rented room and a mother who sold snacks from a tray to pay school fees. Success had never been his coat of armor, it was only a tool. "A woman's humility is part of her beauty," he said softly. Her eyes sharpened. "Are you saying I'm not beautiful anymore?" "I'm saying beauty without humility is like perfume on a corpse," he answered, the words falling heavier than he intended. "It fades quickly." The air tightened between them like a pulled bowstring. "If you wanted a village woman," Victoria snapped, "you should have married one." Silence stacked itself in the space that followed. He looked again at the water, remembering the taste of simpler days, beans on charcoal stoves, laughter that didn't measure itself against anyone else's shine. The fisherman's boat out on the lagoon seemed more honest than the glitter at his back. "All right," he said at last, voice quiet, controlled. "If you won't, I'll bring help in." Victoria exhaled triumphantly, mistaking his surrender for weakness. "Good. And make sure they're competent. I don't want to repeat myself." He nodded and walked past her into the house. On the surface, it sounded like compromise. Underneath, it was a fault line beginning to crack. As he crossed the marble-floored living room, he thumbed a note into his phone, asking the concierge to source a dependable delivery service for fresh groceries, bread, and household essentials. Someone who cared enough to handle things gently. He didn't know it yet, but that single request would change everything. By late morning the driveway shimmered with heat, a pale ribbon cutting through manicured hedges toward the portico. A small motorbike buzzed to a stop beside the fountain. The rider swung a leg down, pulled off her helmet, and shook loose a ponytail flattened by Lagos humidity. Her uniform polo was a shade too big, the logo of a local delivery company stitched at the chest. On her back, a scuffed insulated pack hung like a promise that had already worked too hard. "Good day," she told the security guard with a quick smile. "Delivery for Mr. Thompson." "Name?" the guard asked, eyeing the tablet. "Anna Parker." He made a call. A moment later, the front doors opened and Richard stepped out, rolling up his sleeves. "You must be Anna," he said. "Yes, sir." She lifted the pack carefully onto the marble step and unzipped it with the reverence of a priest opening a reliquary. Out came warm loaves wrapped in brown paper, tomatoes cushioned in paper shreds, a bouquet of scent leaves misted so they wouldn't wilt, eggs nestled in recycled pulp trays. She handled each item the way some people handle news of a child's first steps, deliberate, protective, proud. "You arranged the items by weight," Richard observed, surprised. "Heavy at the base, fragile on top." Anna nodded. "Bad roads, sir. If you pack by hope, the potholes will correct you." He laughed, a small sound that felt like air returning to a sealed room. "What's this?" He reached for a smaller bag. "From my aunt's bakery," Anna said, suddenly shy. "She sends day-old sourdough at half price. It still tastes good if you warm it." The front hall shivered as Victoria's heels announced themselves. She appeared in sunglasses and a silk blouse that looked as if it had made the trip from Paris in its own seat. She took in the motorbike helmet, the worn sneakers, the brown paper. "What's happening on my marble?" she asked, as if the marble had paid the mortgage. "Groceries," Richard answered. "Fresh. Thought we could try cooking tonight." "Street bread," Victoria said, lifting a brow at the bakery bag as if it might bite. "Do we look like people who eat street food?" Richard tore a corner from the loaf, steam rising like an argument you can't ignore. He tasted, paused, then smiled. "It's excellent." Anna's shoulders loosened, just enough to be noticed. Victoria removed her sunglasses and placed them on her head, a crown of disapproval. "Next time, tell the company to send someone, presentable. And use reusable crates. I don't want paper fibers on the floor." "I can source crates, ma'am," Anna said gently. "But paper breathes, so the vegetables don't sweat." Victoria blinked, as if the sentence had been a riddle. "Just do as instructed." "Thank you, Anna," Richard interjected before the air turned brittle. "Please add fresh peppers tomorrow and, what did you call them? Scent leaves?" "Yes, sir." He glanced at the temperature-stained motorbike seat and then at her thin wrist where a cheap digital watch held a crack like a healed scar. "How long have you been riding?" "Since last year," she said. "My father's been sick. Deliveries pay better than waitressing if you take the long routes nobody wants." "Where's home?" "Osen, sir. I rent a room in Surrey for now." Her smile returned, small but sturdy. "It's enough." Victoria's phone pinged. She was already walking away. "Make sure she uses the service entrance next time," she said over her shoulder. Anna pretended not to hear. Pretended not to notice the flash of embarrassment in Richard's eyes on her behalf. She repacked the empty cooler bag, leaving behind the warmth of bread and the shy herb breath of basil. "Same time tomorrow?" Richard asked. "If the rain allows," she said, tipping her helmet. "But I'll try." He watched her ride out beneath bougainvillea shadows, the bike's taillight blinking like a bright dot in a complicated sentence. He broke another piece of bread and tasted it slowly, as if trying to remember something kindness-shaped that he'd once known well. The next week turned the mansion into a stage for an unspoken play, with Anna as the reluctant guest star. Every morning around 10, the low hum of her motorbike would filter through the hedges, carrying with it the smell of bread, ripe fruit, and sometimes groundnut cakes wrapped in brown wax paper. Every time she arrived, the same choreography unfolded, Richard greeting her warmly, Victoria observing with thinly veiled disdain. On Tuesday, Richard came down from his study just as Anna was arranging vegetables on the granite counter. She'd grouped them by color, green beside green, red beside red, everything neat as though preparing for a painting rather than a meal. "You make order out of chaos," Richard said. She smiled shyly. "It's easier to find what you need when things stand together." Before she could continue, Victoria swept in, silk scarf knotted under her chin. She stared at the careful arrangement. "What's this?" "A market stall in my kitchen." "It helps me see the freshness, ma'am," Anna explained. Her tone was soft, not defensive, the way water answers stone. Victoria flicked a tomato back into the basket. "I didn't ask you to redecorate. Just drop them and go. Delivery girls shouldn't linger." Anna lowered her eyes and began repacking silently. Richard's jaw tightened. "She's not lingering," he said. "She's ensuring nothing spoils." Victoria's laugh rang out sharp as glass. "Next thing you know, you'll invite her to sit at the table." On Thursday, the argument shifted to the bakery bread again. Richard broke a loaf and offered a piece across the breakfast table. "Taste it, Victoria. Just once." She sniffed the slice. "I don't eat food with dust footprints on it. If you want to poison yourself with street yeast, be my guest." Richard chewed deliberately, savoring the crunch. "It tastes of work. Honest work." "And desperation," Victoria snapped. Her eyes darted toward Anna, who was quietly unstacking eggs. "Do you think we need desperation in this house? What will people say when they see us eating scraps delivered by her?" The word "her" landed like an insect sting. Anna kept her hand steady, though the heat rushed to her cheeks. She finished aligning the eggs and whispered, "Thank you for your patronage, sir, ma'am," before stepping back. Richard turned toward his wife. "It doesn't matter what people say, Victoria. It matters what's true." "Truth?" Victoria laughed again. "Truth is we pay her to ride the bike through gutters and bring it into our world. Nothing more." That evening, Richard sat alone in his study, fingers resting on the edge of his mother's photograph. She had worn market dust on her wrappers, yet her hands had always smelled of soap and cooking smoke, of love that didn't measure itself against class. He remembered her words, "If you forget what it is to respect people, even your money will forget you." Downstairs, Anna packed her bike with empty crates. The gardener watched her and muttered under his breath, "That girl works like fire." She smiled faintly but kept her eyes low. Kindness was safest when it traveled quietly. Richard, looking from the upstairs window, thought, how can someone who owns nothing give more grace than a woman who owns everything? The tension was no longer background noise. It was becoming the script of their days. The Friday sky bruised itself purple as clouds gathered over Lagos. By the time Anna's motorbike sputtered into Richard Thompson's driveway, the first drops of rain had started to fall. She parked hurriedly, helmet damp, uniform clinging to her shoulders. In her insulated pack were grilled tilapia, garden-fresh spinach, and a special cake her aunt had sent, as thanks for a steady customer. She entered the portico, apologizing softly to the guard. "Traffic held me, sir." Apapa Bridge was. Victoria's voice cut through the drizzle like a blade. "You're late." Anna froze at the threshold. Victoria stood on the marble veranda in a fitted evening gown, her makeup sharp enough to wound. Guests would be arriving soon for a dinner she had planned, her social circle gathering to sip imported champagne and judge quietly behind jeweled clutches. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Anna said, lowering her eyes. "It was the rain." "No excuses," Victoria snapped. "You think time bends because you come from mud roads?" She stepped forward, heels clicking. "Do you know what late delivery means in this house? It means humiliation. And tonight, that lesson will be yours." She gestured toward the garden. "Drop the pack." Anna obeyed, placing it carefully on a stone bench. Now, Victoria continued, her voice smooth with cruelty, take that humility you pretend to carry and sit where you belong. She pointed at the dog kennel tucked into the shaded corner of the lawn. Two German shepherds padded restlessly inside the adjacent cage, their eyes glinting in curiosity. Anna's stomach dropped. "Ma, please. Sit," Victoria ordered. "For 1 hour. No food, no water. Let the mosquitoes keep you company. That way you'll learn what 5 minutes can cost." Richard's SUV purred at the gates just then, headlights cutting through the wet twilight. He parked and stepped out, loosening his tie, shoulders heavy with the day. He glanced toward the veranda, ready to greet his wife, but the sight at the garden's edge rooted him in place. A small figure inside the kennel. Knees drawn up, scarf slipping from damp hair, hands trembling against cold metal bars. "Anna." His voice broke the rain's hush. She looked up, eyes wide with shame. Richard dropped his briefcase where he stood and strode across the grass, rain spattering his shirt. "What is this?" He pulled at the lock. "Who put you here?" Before she could answer, Victoria descended the steps like a queen prepared for battle. "Oh, you're back early," she said. Her tone was nonchalant, her lipstick a dangerous red. "Victoria," Richard's voice lowered into thunder. "Why is Anna locked in a cage?" "She was late. And lateness has consequences. Do you want the staff thinking there are no standards in this house?" "You locked a human being in a kennel meant for animals," Richard said, shaking with disbelief. "Over 5 minutes. She's just a delivery girl," Victoria replied coolly. "Don't act like you've never disciplined staff before." Richard tore the key from her hand, unlocked the cage, and reached for Anna. "Come, you're safe now." Anna hesitated, eyes flicking between them, then placed her trembling hand in his. Her skin was cold, her dignity even colder. Inside, Richard ordered gently. "Eat, rest." As she hurried toward the servants' quarters, Victoria sneered. "So now you're her savior? Should I be worried about how protective you've become of my delivery girl?" Richard turned to her, rain dripping from his brow, voice rising for the first time in years. "This is not softness, Victoria. This is decency. Something you seem to have lost." And in that storm-soaked moment, Richard knew his marriage had reached a line that could never be uncrossed. Morning light fell hard on the Thompson mansion, cutting across marble floors polished to mirrors. The house, usually alive with echoes of Victoria's demands, now sat under a hush of dread. In the living room, a glass coffee table gleamed beneath the weight of a brown envelope, placed there by Richard's longtime friend and lawyer, David Hughes. Victoria descended the staircase in a silk robe the color of ivory wine, a porcelain cappuccino cup in hand. She glanced at David first, then at Richard, who stood stiffly beside the table in a navy suit. "What's this?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Another property deal? Don't tell me we've bought out that estate in Banana Island." Richard didn't move. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Not a property, Victoria. Papers." "What papers?" "Divorce papers." The cup halted midair. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room, so loud it seemed to echo. Then she laughed, brittle as breaking glass. "You're joking." "I don't joke with my peace," Richard replied. "And I have none left with you." Her laughter stopped. A cold stillness spread across her face. "You're ending this marriage, because of her. A delivery girl?" "I'm ending it because of you," Richard said, his tone steel-wrapped in velvet. "Because you've forgotten compassion. Because you treat people as if they are beneath you. Because last night you locked a young woman in a kennel and felt nothing." David shifted awkwardly, looking anywhere but at Victoria. "You're overreacting," Victoria sneered. "Staff need discipline. You think this is cruelty? You've become soft, Richard. Too soft. Softness is not the problem, he said. The problem is cruelty disguised as standards. I was born into nothing, Victoria. My mother worked herself to the bone so I could eat, so I could learn. If she were alive to see how you treat people, she would not recognize me, or this house. Victoria placed the cup down with a sharp clink. Her eyes glittered with venom. So, what now? You throw me out and replace me with your bread girl? That's your grand plan? If I admire her, Richard answered quietly, it is because she has something you lost a long time ago. Humility. Respect for people. A heart. Her voice rose, shrill, like a knife dragged against metal. If you file this divorce, I will ruin you in the media. Do you hear me? I'll tell everyone you left me for the delivery girl. That you humiliated me after all these years. Say what you want, Richard thundered suddenly, the room trembling with the power in his voice. You've already ruined yourself. My peace of mind is worth more than your pride. David slid the papers across the glass. Madam, he said softly, these are the terms. Mr. Thompson is offering you a generous settlement. Victoria snatched the papers, flipping through them with shaking hands. Her chin lifted, eyes blazing. Fine. But when the world knows your shame, don't crawl back. The only shame, Richard replied, is that I let it go on this long. She grabbed her phone, heels striking against marble as she stormed out. The echo of her departure sounded like nails being driven into the coffin of their marriage. Richard stood unmoving, the silence now heavy but strangely freeing. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Upstairs, the faint hum of Anna's footsteps drifted from the service wing. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling. The storm was over. Or so he thought. The Thompson mansion, once an echo chamber of arguments and sharp words, had taken on a different tone in the weeks following Victoria's departure. Gone was the constant rhythm of demands shouted down marble corridors. In their place were quieter sounds, the scrape of broom bristles, the gentle clatter of pans, the faint hum of a young woman singing softly to herself as she worked. Richard noticed it most in the mornings. He would come downstairs expecting the cold silence that had haunted him for years, only to find the dining table already set. Plates gleamed, napkins folded into precise triangles, cutlery aligned as though measured with a ruler. Beside them, steam drifted from a pot of tea that always tasted the way he liked, strong, steady, comforting. And always, there was Anna. Good morning, sir, she would say, her scarf tied neatly, her eyes warm but respectful. Every time, Richard felt the weight in his chest lighten just a little. At first, his gratitude toward her was practical. She was efficient, dependable, someone who noticed small details without being told. The bread never arrived stale, the vegetables were always fresh, and even the flowers in the garden seemed to bloom brighter under her touch. But with each passing week, it grew into something deeper. One Saturday afternoon, Richard returned from a board meeting later than expected. He set his briefcase down by the door and caught sight of Anna kneeling in the flower beds, pulling weeds with her bare hands. The sun slanted low, turning her hair into threads of copper. Her uniform was dusted with soil, yet her movements carried a quiet dignity, as if the act of caring for the earth mattered as much as serving food on silver. You shouldn't be doing that without gloves, Richard said, stepping closer. She looked up, startled, then smiled. It's fine, sir. Gloves make me slower. You work too hard, he said, his voice carrying more concern than command. Her smile softened, touched with something tender. Work keeps my mind from worrying about my father. His illness, she trailed off, biting her lip, then added, every delivery, every extra naira, it all goes to his medicine. Richard felt something twist in his chest. He thought of Victoria, whose greatest complaint had been the spa's waiting list. And then of Anna, carrying her family's burdens on a motorbike across flooded streets. The contrast nearly took his breath away. That evening, as the house settled into silence, Richard found himself in his study, staring at the photograph of his late mother. He remembered her bent back, her calloused hands, her quiet strength. And in that memory, he saw Anna's face. Later, as Anna cleared the dining table, Richard spoke without planning to. "You've changed this house, Anna." She paused, tilting her head. "Me, sir?" "How?" "You filled it with peace," he said simply. "With respect. With warmth." Her cheeks flushed, and she looked down quickly. "I only do what I can." Richard smiled faintly. "Sometimes, doing what you can is more than enough." When she left the room, he sat there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. For the first time in years, he felt not just relief, but something else. Hope. The sun was lowering itself gently into the Lagos lagoon, painting the sky in hues of gold, rose, and violet. The garden behind Richard Thompson's mansion glowed with a soft radiance, the almond tree casting its long evening shadow across the lawn. The air was alive with the hum of cicadas and the faint fragrance of hibiscus drifting through the breeze. It was the perfect evening for what Richard had decided must finally be said. He stood beneath the almond tree, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his hands resting behind his back. In his palm sat a velvet box, heavier in meaning than in weight. He had considered and reconsidered, told himself to wait for the right moment, and then realized that life rarely gave perfect timing. Sometimes one had to create it. Anna approached from the house, her steps light but uncertain. She was still in a simple cream gown she had sewn herself, the kind she wore after her deliveries were done, when she helped tidy or cook before heading home. Her scarf was tied neatly, her face washed clean, glowing faintly in the dying light. "You sent for me, sir?" she asked softly, stopping a few feet away. "Yes," Richard replied, his voice lower than usual. He gestured for her to join him under the tree. For a moment, he only looked at her, really looked. The strength in her posture, the humility in her eyes, the quiet grace that seemed to make every space she entered warmer. "Anna," he began, steadying himself, "when you first came here, you were simply the delivery girl bringing food and bread to this house. You worked hard, kept your head down, never complained, even when life was cruel to you. Over time, I came to see more than just your work. I saw your heart, a heart filled with kindness, loyalty, and compassion." Her eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing, letting his words settle between them. "You healed this home," he continued. "After years of noise and pride, you brought peace back into my life. And in doing so, you healed me." Anna's throat tightened, her hands clasping nervously in front of her. "Sir." Richard smiled faintly and opened the velvet box. Inside gleamed a delicate gold ring, its single diamond catching the last rays of sunlight. "I've been thinking about this for months," he admitted. "Love doesn't always arrive in the way we expect. Sometimes it comes quietly, steadily, right in front of us. Anna Parker, will you marry me?" For a moment, she could only stare, her mind a blur of disbelief. "Sir, I'm just a delivery girl." "No," he interrupted gently, stepping closer. "You are not just anything. You are the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. The title of delivery girl is your job. The title of wife will be your honor, if you'll have it." Her eyes brimmed with tears as she covered her mouth with trembling hands. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger, "Yes, sir. I will." Relief and joy broke across his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. She let out a soft laugh between tears, and he chuckled with her. For the first time in years, the garden heard genuine laughter, theirs mingling with the evening breeze. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers that dripped light like liquid diamonds. Flashbulbs from cameras sparked across the polished marble as Lagos society's finest glided through the space in gowns and tuxedos. Waiters moved gracefully with trays of champagne flutes while a string quartet filled the air with music that sounded elegant but cold. It was the night of the annual philanthropy gala, and all eyes were on Richard Thompson, newly divorced but still one of the city's most powerful real estate moguls. Richard stood near the front, in conversation with board members, while Anna remained quietly at his side in a simple but elegant navy gown he had insisted she wear. She had been hesitant, her hands more accustomed to carrying deliveries than clutching satin, but tonight she was his guest. His choice. His future. The whispers had already begun before the evening even started. "Isn't that the delivery girl?" one woman hissed behind her jeweled clutch. "Imagine leaving Victoria for her." Others snapped photos, eager for headlines. Anna kept her chin down, focusing on the details, the soft music, the lights, the clinking glasses, anything but the eyes that weighed her like scales. Then the room shifted. Victoria arrived. She swept through the double doors like a storm dressed in crimson silk. Cameras turned instantly. The crowd parted, murmuring. Her smile was painted, her hair gleamed, and her heels clicked like a countdown. She had been absent from the public eye for months, but tonight she was ready to reassert herself, not as the abandoned wife, but as the woman who still knew how to own a stage. "Good evening," she purred as she approached Richard, her voice just loud enough for the nearby microphones. "I hope you're enjoying yourself." "Victoria," Richard said coolly, his jaw tightening. "I see you brought your guest." Her eyes flicked to Anna, scanning her gown with venom disguised as amusement. "How thoughtful of you." Anna lowered her gaze, heart hammering. Then Victoria turned, raising her voice just enough for the circle of journalists, investors, and board members to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce the woman my ex-husband left me for, a delivery girl. Yes, you heard me correctly. While I managed his empire, he traded me for someone who carried groceries on a motorbike." Gasps rippled across the room. Cameras flashed like lightning. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Someone whispered, "Is this true?" Anna's face burned, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. She wanted to disappear, but the spotlight seemed cruelly fixed on her, catching every tremble, every blush of humiliation. Richard stepped forward. "Victoria, enough." But she wasn't finished. "This is the man you trust to handle billions," she sneered at the crowd. "He abandoned stability for scraps delivered at his door. Imagine what other reckless choices he'll make with your investments." The music faltered. Conversations died. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Anna stood frozen, fighting the lump in her throat, knowing the narrative was slipping away. Every headline was already being written: "CEO leaves wife for delivery girl." Victoria smiled, victorious in her cruelty. She had built her alliances carefully. Tonight, she would shatter Richard's credibility and drag Anna through the mud until neither could rise again. In that moment, under chandeliers and camera flashes, Anna realized she was no longer just fighting for dignity. She was fighting for survival. The courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled for space near the back, their pens ready to script the next scandal, while executives from Richard's company sat stiffly in the front rows. A few whispered anxiously, still unsettled by Victoria's public outburst at the gala. The tension was a living thing, heavy in the air. At the center of it all sat Richard, calm but stern, and beside him, Anna, no longer in a delivery uniform, but in a modest gray suit that lent her an air of quiet authority. Across from them, Victoria's face glowed with confidence. She sat flanked by her legal team, diamonds glinting on her wrists, lips curled into the faintest smirk. She thought she had won. Tonight, the court would see Richard as reckless and Anna as nothing more than a homewrecker. The judge called the session to order. Murmurs died instantly. Victoria's lawyer began, presenting her case with rehearsed dramatics. He painted Richard as impulsive, blinded by infatuation with a mere delivery girl, unfit to lead his company or manage the family assets. He even played a recording of Victoria's speech from the gala, hoping to frame her as the wronged woman rather than the aggressor. The board members in the gallery shifted, some nodding reluctantly. Then it was Anna's turn. She rose slowly, clutching a slim file of documents. Her hands trembled for a moment, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "With respect, my lord," she began, "this case is not about titles. It is about truth." Victoria laughed under her breath, but Anna continued, opening the file. "For months, Mrs. Thompson has spoken of dignity and betrayal. But here," she held up the first page, "are bank statements showing funds she quietly diverted from Richard's company accounts into an offshore account." Gasps swept the courtroom. And here, she revealed another document, our communications between Mrs. Thompson and a rival developer, offering them confidential project details in exchange for a share of profits. Richard's lawyer leaned forward eagerly, confirming the documents as authentic. The judge demanded silence as whispers erupted. Anna's voice grew firmer. "And finally, your lordship, recordings. Months ago, while working deliveries, I helped a family friend who was preparing evidence for a fraud case. I learned then how to preserve records properly. Out of fear for Mr. Thompson's reputation, I began keeping my own." She pressed play on her phone. Victoria's voice filled the chamber, dripping with arrogance. "He's too soft. If I leak just a few plans to his competitors, I'll still profit when he loses. Richard never sees it coming." Victoria's face drained of color. The courtroom exploded in shock. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order." Richard turned, his eyes soft but burning with pride as he looked at Anna. She stood taller now, no longer the girl mocked for carrying groceries on a motorbike, but a woman who had just shifted the tide of justice. Anna looked directly at Victoria, her voice calm yet unyielding. "I may deliver packages, Mrs. Thompson. But tonight, you delivered your own downfall." The words landed like a final verdict. Victoria collapsed into her chair, disbelief etching every line of her face as reporters scribbled furiously. The divorce settlement was finalized within minutes, her reputation in ruins. And for the first time, Anna felt not just defended, but vindicated. The hall smelled of fresh flowers and palm wine, not the imported roses or foreign perfumes of Victoria's lavish parties, but blooms gathered from local markets, sun-bright marigolds, white lilies, and hibiscus tied with ribbons of cloth. The air was filled with soft laughter, drums beating gently in rhythm with hearts, and the glow of a love story that had been forged in fire. Richard stood at the altar, dressed in a rich navy agbada embroidered with gold thread. His shoulders, once heavy with tension, now carried only anticipation. The guests, family, close friends, and colleagues who had stood by him, watched with quiet awe. They had seen him broken by arrogance, humiliated in public, and redeemed by truth. Today, they would see him reborn in love. The doors opened. Anna entered. She was not draped in extravagance. Her gown was simple white lace, modest yet elegant, flowing around her as though woven with grace itself. Her scarf was replaced by a delicate veil, but her brown eyes shone clearly beneath it, steady and bright. No longer the delivery girl, she walked as a woman fully claimed, her dignity restored, her future waiting. Richard's gaze never wavered as she approached. In her, he saw not just beauty but the strength that had carried her through poverty, humiliation, and betrayal. In him, she saw not just wealth but the humility of a man who valued character above status. When they faced each other, the officiant's voice rose above the quiet. "Do you, Richard Thompson, take this woman?" Richard interrupted gently, his voice warm and firm. "I promise to love you, protect you, and respect you, not because of what you do, but because of who you are." Gasps fluttered through the hall, vows spoken before the officiant's prompting. His sincerity filled the room more powerfully than tradition. Anna's hands trembled slightly as she took his. "And I promise to stand by you in peace and in storms," she whispered, her voice carrying strength through its softness. "To keep our home a place of kindness. To love you with all my heart. Applause erupted as the officiant declared them husband and wife. Their kiss was not dramatic but tender, the sealing of a bond born from humility, tested by fire, and crowned with peace. 1 week later, Richard fulfilled another vow. One he had made silently the day he learned of Anna's father's illness. He arranged for Mr. Parker to be flown abroad for treatment. Months of hospital beds and weary prayers ended in a miracle. The man who had once been bedridden now walked into the Thompson mansion with steady steps and laughter that filled the halls. Tears streaked his cheeks as he clasped Richard's hands. "You didn't just marry my daughter," he said, voice breaking. "You saved me." Richard smiled. "She saved me first." The mansion no longer echoed with sharp voices or heavy silences. Instead, it was alive with harmony, the hum of daily tasks, the rustle of flowers Anna tended in the garden, the warmth of family meals. Where pride once ruled, humility healed. Where cruelty had reigned, kindness now blossomed. And as Richard and Anna sat in the garden one evening, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, Anna leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You've given me more than I ever dreamed." Richard kissed her forehead gently. "And you've given me something money could never buy. Peace." For both of them, it was only the beginning.